My name is Amos Winter, and welcome to the Mitcanic YouTube channel. Now this series is going to be a bit different than the ones I've done in the past. I'm going to try to answer a question I think many of us who grew up in the Top Gear generation have asked themselves. How could I do an awesome European adventure in a car that's fun to drive? Well, luckily, my wife and I, 5 years ago, were able to answer that question with this guy, our 1990 964 911, which we drove 20,000 miles all over the continent. A few years ago, my wife made me this beautiful map that shows everywhere we went in the 964 around Europe. From way above the Arctic Circle and the Åland Islands in Norway, through all the Great Alps passes and the Nürburgring, all the way down to Sicily and doing the full Targa Florio, and even up to the NC 500 around the head of Scotland. And during that journey, we put stickers on the rear side windows, on one side to show all the attractions we had seen, and on the other side to document all the locations we visited. This year, we're lucky enough to be doing another awesome European adventure. In a few days, we're moving to Switzerland, and we'll be there for the next few months. And I've been thinking a lot about how I'd like to do some more great road trip adventures. But one key thing has changed in our lives in the last few years. We would love to take the 964 with us again. However, now we have a 3-year-old son. And if we put a child seat in the back of the 964, there's really no leg room for a fully grown adult. All summer, I've been thinking about what car would be perfect for our upcoming European adventure. One that's fast and fun to drive, ideally with cool retro styling from the 80s or 90s, and that's big enough to fit the three of us comfortably, haul all our stuff, and even go get groceries. And I realized none of our cars at home can fit the bill, so we obviously have to buy a new one. And finally it dawned on me, the perfect car, the Audi RS2. An idea so good, they put it on a t-shirt. Why get a 911 when you can have room for groceries too? And what I particularly like about this shirt is the subtext. The RS2 was built with two strictly met objectives, high performance and practicality. With 315 brake horsepower, its turbocharged 2.2 liter will dispense with a Ferrari Testarossa and leave a Porsche 911 floundering. Boy, doesn't that hit home for me. The all-wheel drive provides plenty of grip and there's neutral handling. Not bad for a fully functional station wagon. I couldn't agree more. Most RS2s were sold in Europe, so it made most sense to find one there. The problem is, it's basically impossible for a non-EU citizen to register a car in Europe. And I couldn't find much information on the internet of how an American can buy a car and then actually use it in Europe. But I figured out a way to do it, and I'm going to share it with you in this video series to hopefully help you find your dream car, drive it all around Europe, fully legally registered and insured, and then ship it home afterwards. Now, the first thing you want to do is educate yourself about a certain type of license plate that's offered in the EU called a transit plate or an export plate. And what this is a temporary license plate that can be issued by a dealer that enables a person to drive across EU borders in order to buy a car in one country and bring it home, or buy a car and then drive it to a port if they're going to export it. And so these are really handy because even as a foreign person, you can get export plates put on your car and you can drive it. So this website tells you about all the countries and the export plate costs and the validity, how long you can use the plate. So if you look at, say, for example, Austria, you can only use the plate for 3 to 21 days. So for me, I wouldn't want to buy a car in Austria. And by the way, you get the plate where you buy the car, because I wouldn't get enough time to use the car. I want to use my car for 2, if not close to 3 months. So I looked at all the countries that would be candidates in which I could buy a car. France is probably a pretty good one that has validity up to 4 months. But in particular, what stood out to me was Germany. Because in Germany, you can get an export plate for 14 days up to a full year where it's legal to drive that car around the EU. And I also was intrigued by Germany because Germans tend to speak really good English, and also Germany has an excellent supply of great cars. They arguably make the best cars in the world. So this really focused me in on trying to find an RS2 in Germany. The second thing I did was look around at specifically German car classifieds. And so this is an example of one, mobile.de. It's Germany's biggest vehicle marketplace. It's like, I guess, Auto Trader in Germany. And you can see right here, there's 15 RS2s for sale. So I looked through and I'd scour this every day. And I eventually found my RS2 here on this website. The other thing about using a site like this is that I found that sometimes you get postings here first before the big aggregators pick up the postings. And so I got a jump on my car because I saw it here first before I waited to see it on a much bigger website. And I know you can sometimes find foreign cars on US-based websites. Like I think Auto Tempest can search internationally, but it's not going to pick up all these listings. I have never found it able to do that. So go right to the listings of the country where you want to buy a car. Another one that I used that was quite valuable is this one, Auto Scout 24. And this is for the entire EU. This has a broader supply, but you can see there's 20 offers here, whereas there's 15 here. So there's definitely some different cars in between each. So I ended up finding my car on one of these sites. And then I immediately called the dealer. And this is actually my car that I bought. I bought it from a fantastic dealership, Classic Cars in Dornstetten. And Alexander is the sales manager there. And he's been such a pleasure to work with and completely transparent through the whole process. So I immediately called him, started asking lots and lots of questions about the car. And it was actually funny. I told him I race a 911 and I like 911s. And he did a test drive for me and gave me a bunch of feedback. And at first he said, I'm not sure if you're going to like this car because it's a little bit soft. And I had to tell him, no, I understand these cars have softer suspensions than a race car, but that's what I want. I want a fast family car. And so he did a long pull and to make sure the turbocharger turns on and it revs all the way up to red line. All those things work great. So my next piece of advice is call the dealer, get a bunch of feedback about the car and ask a lot of specific questions. So I did. And as I went through this classified listing, and I'll show you some pictures because this is such a beautiful car. I love it. But I was looking for little tiny details. Now, remember, these cars, because they're pretty fast, were modified when they were cheap. People would hop them up, make them into hot rods. And as a result, unfortunately, a lot of these that you find are kind of molested. And I wanted one that was really, really original. So I was looking for little details like the emblem right here is in the correct place. I find a lot that are in the wrong place. I was looking for paint quality. I was looking for the original wheels, which these are. And so all these details were matching up. I was looking for interior mods. I saw some with like extra buttons and other weird things. But this looked perfect. And it is the combo that is the one to have. It's got the Nogaro blue exterior, which is the most desirable color. And what particularly makes this rare is the blue inserts on the door cards and the carbon fiber trim. Other cars are all black, and there's some other colors that were offered, and there's also a fake wood trim that you find sometimes. But I think this is the prettiest color combination and definitely the most desirable and the most valuable. So this looked all good. And then looking in the engine bay, there's some other telltales you'll find in the engine bay that the car's been modified. So missing parts or like new piping that's put in the wrong one. And this is all bone stock. And so Alexander at the car dealership confirmed that there's nothing modified on this car. And that's exactly what I wanted. Also, I appreciate little things like patina on, here's the badge on the rear of the car. And you can see some of the red is rubbed off on the Audi logo, but that's just because it's been washed a zillion times. He did say that the car had been repainted from the door line up, but it was a really good color match, and you can see that in the pictures. If I go back there, you can see that there's no discernible color difference. So I think it was quite well done. So the moral of the story is ask about the car. The second thing I did is this car caught my eye because it was cheap. It was much cheaper than what you find typically for a Nogaro Blue RS2. And the reason it was cheap is right here. 321,000 kilometers. So that's about 200,000 miles. So a lot of people would be scared off by that, but I'm not, because mileage, the effect mileage has on an engine and the wear and tear it creates varies a lot by the type of miles that had been done. So this car was a Swiss car. It was made for the Swiss market and has spent most all of its life in Switzerland. And that's good because Switzerland has extremely strict speed limits. And it means the car was not run as fast, probably, as it would have been if it was a German car. The second thing I did was I asked the dealership for the service history, which the former owner had put meticulously in the user manual. And so it was stamped, every service was stamped, and looking through the stamps, every single dealership that serviced a car was a reputable Porsche or Audi dealer. And the services were done at the correct intervals, like clockwork, like in this case, Swiss clockwork. So that made me confident that the car had been really, really well maintained and looked after. So even though it has high mileage, if it was highway miles and it was serviced regularly, high mileage isn't such a bad thing. Like, it doesn't necessarily kill the car. My 964 has 166,000 miles on it. Engine's fine. No problems at all. Great compression. Still makes peak power from its stock levels. And also an indicator of the quality of the car in that somebody looked after it is just look at the interior, right? These are Alcantara seats, and the carpets are perfect. Everything's perfect about the interior. So somebody really loved this thing and looked after it. And then the third thing I did was I asked the dealership to do a compression test on the engine just to make sure the engine health was good. And so I got the results back from the compression test, and I sent them to my friend Colin, who runs an Audi dealership. He sells like rare and cool Audis called Quattro Sport Motors. It's in Worcester, Massachusetts. He actually let me drive an RS2 before I bought this one just to see what it was like. So I sent it to him and said, hey, what do you think? Does this compression test look good? And he said, yeah, these values are really good. They're within plus minus 10% or so of each other. And that's what you want to see in an RS2. So the engine is great. And also, as a friend of mine, car dealer in the Netherlands, told me, it's a Porsche engine. Porsche engines last forever. And so I agree. It looked like it was in good shape. So all of that together made me really confident that this was the RS2 for me. And I bought it for a price that is close to half of what you typically pay for a Nogaro Blue with blue interior inserts RS2. And what further is going to save money for me is that Germany has a 20% tax on its cars. And you'll see, if you look in these classifieds, like some of them will say, here we go, 20% VAT. And I don't know if that's inclusive or exclusive. You'd want to clarify that. But I had to pay that tax, and that was actually the listing price that they gave was inclusive of that 20% tax. And so I'm going to get that back when I export it out. So I actually get a good amount back. And then with that final price, it really is about half price for a typical blue RS2, particularly one in good condition. So I pulled the trigger, said this is the car I want. I luckily was the first to say I was going to buy it. So I got out ahead of a bunch of people who wanted to buy it after. And in order to drive this in Germany, Classic Cars in Dornstetten was able to set me up with an export plate. And what they were able to do was a maximum of 3 months. And that was really determined by the length of time their insurance company would cover the car. And so they've set up 3 months of registration, 3 months of insurance, which is plenty of time for me and my family to use this in Switzerland. So the license plates are on it now. It's all insured. It has passed the inspection test by Germany called the TUV, which is a much more rigorous test than a typical inspection in the US. And so it's pretty ready to go. Also, I should mention, I had a full service done on it. And so they changed the timing belt and the water pump and all the fluids and everything. And I would recommend you do that as well. I work on my own cars in the US, but I'm not able to do that as comprehensively as if I'm in Europe. And so I had the dealer do it. But I recommend that for two reasons. One, I wanted the car reliable because I'll probably drive it about 10,000 kilometers while we're in Europe. And then the second reason is that I knew they would be able to get spare parts much more easily than I can. They're able to call in German to Audi's Classic Center and get all the parts we need. So they're able to get everything. They even fixed the air conditioning system, so that works perfectly. And everything is working absolutely perfectly on the car, with the exception of the cruise control. They weren't able to replace all those parts. They weren't able to get them. And so I'll have to futz with that when it gets back to the US, but honestly, it doesn't matter much. I don't even use cruise control much. So that is the backstory of how to register and insure a classic car in Europe that you can drive legally for multiple months as an American and have all the paperwork show that you are the proper owner and that the export plates are indeed in your name and set up under your dealership. So I hope that information is helpful if you want to buy a car in Europe. And please stay tuned for the upcoming episodes about my adventures with this RS2. The next one being when I go pick it up with my son in just a few days. See you then.